Hi, everybody. My name's Eric Burns. I'm a sales engineer located in the San Francisco Bay Area. I want to take 10 or 15 minutes to walk you through assembling the Raspberry Pi. There's some pre-assembly work that you can do that'll allow you to have more time to learn about programming and hardware and all the neat things you can do with the Raspberry Pi. The very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open up the case. I really like these CanaKit products. They're good quality. So with the case, you can disassemble this into three pieces. So we'll pull the top off, set that to the side. We can also pull out the sides, set that to the side. And now we've got the bottom. And you can see there's a little slot here where the micro SD card is going to go in. So we can keep that facing toward us. And then we will go ahead and we will open up the Raspberry Pi single board computer. In there, you'll find a little document warning about electrostatic discharge. You can get this from your carpet, towels, blow drying your hair, etc. And it is possible to damage electronic devices. So when we handle the Raspberry Pi, we want to handle it by the edges, or we can grab onto the large ports where it's got, for example, the network port, a couple of USB 3.0 ports, which are in blue, and then a couple other USB ports. One of the other things that's really neat to look at is that we also have 40 pins that are the GPIO. That's general purpose in and out. And you can configure these with software to either take a signal from a sensor or send power out to operate a stepper motor, turn on an LED, all sorts of fun things. But what we're going to go ahead and do is if we slide this in, there's a couple little tabs here on the bottom, and then we can set it down. Now we've got a convenient way to handle the Raspberry Pi where we're less likely to damage it with any electrostatic discharge. Something that's highly unlikely to happen, but this way you're safer. So the next step that we're going to want to do is we're going to go ahead and take the heat sinks out. There's three of them. They're in a little Ziploc bag that's taped to the power adapter. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set a Raspberry Pi that's already got the three adapters or the three heat sinks on there. And if you go into the quick start guide on page 3, they also have a diagram where they point out the CPU, the memory, and the USB 3.0 controller. But this would be a great time to pause the video. It's going to take you a few minutes to peel off that blue tape and position them. Two of the heat sinks are square. Really doesn't matter which way the fins are going on the heat sink. Of course, the one that's rectangular can only go in one location. So again, go ahead and pause the video, get those three heat sinks on, and then we'll continue on with the next steps. So I'm going to go ahead and bring focus just to the single board computer that has the heat sinks on that. We're going to go ahead and we are going to slide the sides on. So now that holds the motherboard in place. And this is a good time to insert the micro SD card. And you can see there's a little slot here. We've got a customized version of the Raspberry Pi OS that's got the correct libraries on it, some sample code, etc. You can go ahead and open that up, and you'll find that there is a micro SD card, just like you would use in your smartphone, in your digital cameras, etc. And we can see the contacts. So if we have the branding logo facing down and the contacts facing up, we can slide it in this slot, and you'll feel that it'll go in just a little bit farther than the sides. You always want to remove this before you separate the motherboard from the bottom of the case. It also is possible to accidentally slide it in between. So make sure that it is, in fact, in the slot. Then what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and let's hook up the GPIO breakout adapter. And this basically gets the 40 pins to a breadboard where it's easier to work with them. And all the pins are labeled here, and this actually lines up with what's on the motherboard. And if you look at the end of the cable, there is a key. And what we can do is we're going to go ahead, and you can see that the key is pointed toward the inside of the motherboard, toward the chips, and we're gently will slide that down. So now we can see that the ribbon cable comes out and goes to our GPIO adapter. Before we close up the case, we're going to go ahead and we are going to insert the fan. Now, the fan we won't necessarily be using during this event, but it's nice to have because later on, if you don't have the GPIO adapter plugged in, you can hook up the wires to that, or you can use the connector wires. Now, technically, negative case pressure is what people work toward. The idea is that it's more efficient, more effective, but you really need a very powerful fan to have that make a difference. So my preference is I tend to push the fan in with the label facing up because that gives us more protection for the fan blades and keeps them from getting caught up in any wires. You can hold the wires in between the couple of spots that click into the case. This is another nice thing about the CanaKit cases, that the ribbon cable can still be in there. And as I said, we've got the two wires out so we can hook up connector wires and plug them into the power rails if we'd like. Now what we're going to do, we are going to go ahead and hook up our keyboard and our mouse. And let's go ahead, slide this out of the way, slide this up to give us a little more room to work with. So the CanaKit keyboard already has 3 built-in USB ports. So I'm going to go ahead and take the mouse and that cable, and we can go ahead and plug it into one of those ports. So you've got a couple others to put in a USB flash drive, maybe hook up a USB camera if you want. So we'll set that down, and then we can take this cable. Since the USB 3 ports are faster, it's better to go ahead and use a normal one for the keyboard and the mouse. So we'll plug that in. Then we can take the connection that is the micro HDMI cable and make sure that it's micro and not mini. The Raspberry Pi Zero does use a mini. We can plug that into port 0 in the middle. You'll want to make sure that this is seated all the way in. If you happen to turn on the computer and you don't see the display but the lights come on, this typically is the culprit. The other item that we're going to bring in, we're going to go ahead, we've got CanaKit's Raspberry Pi switch, which is really nice because the norm is that you unplug and plug back in the power adapter to turn on and off the Raspberry Pi. This gives you the convenience of, it adds an LED, so you'll know if the connection's loose with the Raspberry Pi, if it's not powering up, and it also has a nice push button for you. So close to us, next to the micro HDMI adapter cable, we can plug in that USB-C. And now when we push the power button, we'll see we've got a light here. We can also see that we're getting a light on the Raspberry Pi itself. And there's also light to the UC-tronics Breakout kit. So we know that we have power to those power rails on each side of the breadboard. So at this point, you should see that you've got lights on. You should see the operating system boot up on your computer. If you have any problems or have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We'll see if we can help you before the event. And looking forward to experiencing programming and hardware with the Raspberry Pi during this event. Thank you.